listeners, welcome to another episode of the Hi-Fi Preschool and Kids Weekly Training Podcast. My name is Crystal Mizuka. I am part of this awesome Hi-Fi team. I am here with my good friends and amazing coworkers, Rachel and Kayla. Ladies, how are you doing today? Kayla gave me a thumbs up because she just took a drink of water, so sorry you couldn't see that.
I'm
Rachel,
doing great. Sorry, listeners. I was like, oh, Crystal's doing this intro. I can take a little drink of water in the midst of it. I was not expecting to answer a question so soon.
Whoops. I was watching Kayla drink water. Give the thumbs up. So.
I love keeping you guys on your toes. That's why I'm here. Well, actually, it's not why I'm here. We are here because we are in the third week of October talking about this third week's lesson, which is for preschool, God gives me a new way. For kids, God gives me a new identity. But we are both doing the same Bible story, which is Jesus called Peter from Luke 5, 1 through 11. So before we dive into the content and getting our listeners all excited for what they're going to get to lead in their ministries this week, I want to ask my friends an icebreaker question. You know that we love these icebreaker connection questions in Hi-Fi because it is a great way to build real connection and true belonging. And so, Rachel and Kayla, what is one word that you would use to describe yourself? And how do you see that word play out in your daily life?
Okay, so I don't know why, but I find this an incredibly difficult question. But I've been racking my brain trying to think, and the first word that came to mind was steady. And so I think it comes out in, I think even the way I'm wired, kind of being tenacious and trying to get things kind of accomplished and done and often predictably done. And so I think steady might be it.
I love that. I think that those of us who work with you would 1000% agree with you. And
Absolutely.
Listeners, if you don't know, Rachel's got 2 boys. She needs to be steady. Because boys are the opposite often, especially when you're raising them. And so if Rachel wasn't steady, then I think that they might be in the ER too much.
More than we are. Yeah. I joked yesterday to a friend and I said, I think I'm going to become a mommy blogger and call my blog My Feral Life. So
Yes.
It's a good descriptor.
I love it. Kayla, what about you?
That's amazing. One word to describe myself. I would say discerning is a word I would use to describe myself. I am someone who, once there are ideas out on the table and once there are things to be talked about, I really enjoy just thinking through all of the little nooks and crannies of something. And so thinking about asking a lot of questions. Is this this way for this reason or for that reason? Or if someone hears this, how might they hear it? Would they hear it this way or would they hear it that way? And so I think in a lot of my life, I try to be really discerning, but that also means that my brain is running like a million miles a minute, trying to filter through all the questions in my brain and then pick one to, say out loud. So yeah, that would be fine.
I think that's funny because of course we see that at work, but also you're getting married in 2 weeks. I can only imagine all of the things that are running in your mind that need discernment. And it's like there's not enough time in the day for all the discernment that needs to happen. Well, today we are talking about identity, who we are and how we see ourselves, what drives us, the purpose and all that kinds of stuff. And the truth of the matter is, our identities are radically transformed when we experience the forgiveness of Jesus. And so thinking about our Bible story this week, this great moment when Jesus calls Peter to follow him. Rachel, let me ask you, how does this story teach that forgiveness is not just like, hey, believe in me and you get to go to heaven, but it's actually a transformation of our whole lives.
Yeah, I think our Bible story is a really clear example of this because we see this really amazing moment in our Bible story this week where Peter says, "Go away from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man," and he falls to his knees in front of Jesus, and he's acknowledging the state of him in that moment. But then we see Jesus say that he's going to give him a new way to live. He's going to have him fish
Yeah.
for people. And I think it's so incredible because he doesn't say, "Yes, Peter, you're a sinner and nothing can be done with for you." And he gives him a new identity and he gives him a new plan for his life. And I just think that's such a beautiful picture because, and I think I've said this on the podcast before, but a way I love to look at our life with Jesus is like a race, and how when we become a Christian, when we are forgiven, we enter the race for the first time. It's not that we cross the finish line, because I think sometimes we look at salvation as a finish line. And that I think is kind of shows that idea of that kind of cliche of a ticket to heaven. But instead, it's entering the race. And so we get to enter the race of a life of following Jesus, being transformed into his likeness, and being continually forgiven and changed. And it's an identity change, from the ground up, whenever we get to enter the race and to be forgiven by Jesus.
I love that. One of the things that can sometimes be hard as we come up with hi-fi is we have to limit the things that we include in our sessions. And when I think about this story, I think a lot about the context of what it must have been like for Peter when Jesus called him, because in that culture, rabbis would call disciples to follow them, and they would call the boys and the young men who had been in school and had learned a lot of the Torah and had just shown themselves to be these academic scholars and these godly people. And Jesus finds this fisherman, this guy who had been out on a boat, like nothing. We see nothing that would have been like, this is the guy, like this is one of the people. And yet Jesus sees something in him and even tells him, like, I'm calling you to follow me and I'm calling you to be a fisher of men. And how hopeful that is for preschoolers and kids who are hearing this, to know that when Jesus calls you, he's not calling you because you've proved yourself. He's not calling you because you're already all of this or all that. He is calling you because he loves you. And also, he has this great and amazing identity. You're not defined by what you do and what other people think of you. You're defined by who I say you are. And I call you my child. I call you my follower. I call you my friend. And it's just such a great, great thing. And so, Kayla, why do you think it's so important that we teach forgiveness in the context of identity change?
Yeah, I think that it's great to, to think about this idea of identity change in the context of forgiveness for a lot of the reasons we've just been talking about, right? Because when Jesus calls Peter, it's not a one and done thing. Like Peter continually is changed. His whole identity of who he is different now that he's following Jesus. When we look in the story and we see, Peter sees this miracle that Jesus performs. He realizes this is something only God can do. And I am in the presence of God's holiness.
Yeah.
It changed him. And it was so much less about the outside and what was going on outside of him. And it was so much more about him understanding, whoa, I am in need here. I need God's forgiveness. I am not fit for you to stand in front of me. And I think that it's important to think about forgiveness in the context of this identity change, because if we carry out that story of Peter's life, Peter was not perfect, right? Like we see him continually put his foot in his mouth. We see him, he is the one who betrays Jesus at the crucifixion and denies knowing him, not just once, not just twice, 3 times. And we see this need for continual forgiveness. And in those moments, Peter could have easily said, I've screwed up too much. Like, God forgave me this one time, but that was then and this is now, and he's not going to forgive me for this. But when we understand that forgiveness is in this context of full identity transformation, then it helps us ground ourselves and ground our identity to know, even when I mess up in this way, even when I, do this thing or do the thing I don't want to do, which is what Paul says later in the New Testament, that doesn't mean that God's given up on me. Yeah. It doesn't mean that my identity has changed. It means that I have continued in this sin pattern and I need to repent of it. I need to come back to who I am and who God says that I am. And so as we teach about forgiveness, we really need to lean into and focus on, this isn't just one time. This isn't just, God forgives me for this one thing, but he won't forgive me for that thing over there. But when we talk about salvific forgiveness and how we are trusting in Jesus again and again and again, and how he transforms who we are into who he says that we are, then we are able to really lean into that when we do continue to sin or when we do mess up and we do need to come back to the Lord and say, I should have done this different, and repent of that, truly turn away from it and not pursue it any longer. And so, for me, it's more about anchoring who we are so that when those times come in our lives, that we're able to point back to and understand our identity as a follower of Jesus, as a forgiven follower of Jesus, and be able to let that be what leads us and changes us more so than the mistakes or the wrong choices that we've been making.
It's almost like we could have made, like this main idea a little longer, which we wouldn't do, but like for preschool, God gives me a new way and he helps me, like he keeps me on that way. Like that new way doesn't go away if I make a mistake. God gives me a new identity and that new identity doesn't change. I've heard some people say, and a bit of it is semantics, but I get the heart behind it, where after you follow Jesus, you don't refer to yourself as a sinner anymore, but you refer to yourself as someone who sins because Jesus has given you a new identity and he calls you, a child of God. And so it's so great for preschoolers and kids to know that this new identity is a gift that comes through forgiveness, and that even as sin struggles can continue and will continue in their lives, that identity remains the same. That's Jesus would have still called Peter, fisher of men. That's why we saw things play out. Spoiler alert, if you read the end of the Gospels, you'll see it works out well for Peter. Okay, so oftentimes we end the podcast with just some really good kind of encouragement and even practical tools for ministry leaders to use when they are with preschoolers and kids on a Sunday or on a Wednesday. But let's do this a little different. Let's just speak some encouragement to the leaders who are listening right now. So Rachel, Kayla, how can this Bible story and this main idea maybe just encourage or maybe even challenge leaders listening right now to just fully live out their new identities in Jesus in their daily lives during the week, in their workplaces, in their homes, and all that kinds of stuff? What would you say to the leaders that are listening right now?
I think I'd say that to embrace it, to embrace their new identity, because we can get bogged down in our daily life. We can get bogged down by looking back on our week and the different things we've experienced, or even the way we've talked to ourselves and some of the things that, we've said about our identity or what we believe about who we are. And I think it's such an encouraging, wonderful reminder that, that they have a new way to live. They have a new identity and they're different because of Jesus. And I think it's so encouraging to think about how Jesus gave Peter a new plan for his life with his identity to go and to be a fisher of men. And for our leaders who are listening, they have a new identity and a new plan for their lives. And they get to live it out by sharing Jesus's love with preschoolers and kids this week. And so I guess my encouragement is, regardless of what's happened this week, be encouraged, because you have such an amazing opportunity ahead of you to love and share with the kids who you're going to meet in your classrooms.
Yeah, that's great. I would add to that, well, one thing that I'll say that I would add, failure isn't final. When we see Peter encounter Jesus, he recognizes his failures. Yeah. Like, he sees his inaptitude. He sees how unworthy he is. And he's right. He is unworthy. Like, he doesn't deserve to stand in the presence of Jesus, like any of us deserve to stand in the presence of Jesus. And yet, our failures, our past mistakes, our wrong choices, the things that we're not proud of, that's not the final end of the story. Jesus looks at him and says, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people. Like, I will change you. I will transform you. I will do for you what nothing in this world can do for you." So I think if I would give any encouragement, it would just be to remind our listeners and to remind ourselves, like, when we fail, that's not final. We don't have to stay stuck there. We can remember that we are called to this, that that we are capable of what God has called us to, and he is continuing to refine us and continuing to shape us, and that we don't have to stay stuck in that failure. We can be reminded of who we are in that new identity in Christ and lead from a place of just resting and trusting in Jesus, and not leading from a place of trying to fill the gap or from our own efforts.
Oh, that is so encouraging. Thank you, both of you. And I'm just praying right now, listeners, that you will take those words of wisdom to heart, that you will be inspired and encouraged in this incredible, incomparable identity that you have as a child of God, as a fisher of men, maybe of children, we might want to say, and as a follower of Jesus. And so we are so thankful that you joined us this week. We hope that you'll tune in next week, where we get to talk about how God gives us a new hope. And until then, we are praying for you, and just know that you are doing great kingdom work as you build real connection and true belonging.